Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book versus episode video. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at Say, Cheese, and Die, the book versus the episode. Now, Say, Cheese, and Die was the fourth Goosebumps book ever made. This was one of the first 5 Goosebumps books I remember reading as a kid. And I used to love this as a child, but as the years have gone on, I've kind of fell out of love with it. There are some things I don't like about the story, unfortunately, and I will recognize this at the very least. It does have its dark moments, and it's pretty solid for a Goosebumps tale. The episode I gave a 4.4 out of 5 stars, which might be surprising to a lot of people, but I think this is easily one of the more memorable episodes from the TV show. Not without its problems, though. It keeps a lot of the sins the book had, and there are some things that I don't like about it inherently. But nonetheless, I think both are pretty solid adventures either way you go. Sometimes, if you look at the scores off the bat, you might be able to guess where I'm going to lean. But with this one, I think it's going to be more even than most people will think. I do think that there's going to be some give and takes here, given all the criteria. And the criteria I look over in book versus episode videos are always circumvented around these things. The first are the characters. Which version did it better? Did the character appear in one and not the other? Sometimes there's some default points to those, but I don't really count those all that much. But yeah, sometimes it happens. The second criteria is atmosphere. Which one had a better atmosphere / setting? Sometimes we go into aesthetics and tone. And for this one, I will be covering aesthetics. And the main one I want to talk about really is the look of the camera and the camera's abilities. So we'll be looking at that, okay? Then we go over plot, which one had a better overall plot. We go over the climax, which one had a better climax. And then the ending, which one had the better ending. So, with Say, Cheese, and Die, I guess we'll start off with characters. We can start off with Greg Banks, who is the main character in either version of the story. In the book, Greg goes through a lot of emotional stuff throughout the entire story. I feel like with Greg's character in the book, the consternation is with majority of fans in the Goosebumps community. There seems to be a dividing point with his character. Some people think that he's relatable. Some people think that he makes some really dumb decisions. And I think there's a bit of truth in both of that. I do feel like Greg Banks does get overly hated on, at least his book counterpart, because of certain choices he's forced to go through in the story. Like, there's a thing involving his friend's baseball game and his friend's birthday party where he's forced to bring this camera over to, and he has to like consciously go through with it. As in the episode, Greg's given a lot more room without those difficult choices. These things just happen in the episode because he has the camera already in his possession, and it eliminates a lot of those dumb decisions. And plus, Greg is played by Ryan Gosling. And I think, for the most part, Greg is played very well by Ryan. And I think, for me, I kind of weigh two things. Which one do I prefer? Do I prefer Greg in a version where he's not made to make difficult decisions? Or do I prefer Greg in a version where you feel more emotions with his character? At least the stuff that adds on in dog piles in the story. In my opinion, if I have a slight edge, I'm going to give it to the episode. But I will give my praise to Greg in the book. I think he's overhated. I think a lot of people really conflate what's going on. I think R.L. Stine was going for a realism approach. There is a level of disbelief all the characters have with the camera in both versions that Greg kind of, sees through and has to convince himself that it's actually happening. You get more of that in the book with the cost of those decisions he has to make. The episode, you do kind of feel that similarly, but I wish the episode had more emotions, because if it was, I would clearly give it here. But like I said, I think the decisions really stick out more to me. So it's less frustrating. Even though I don't really find it an issue in the book, I'm going to give it to Greg to the episode. Because, less problems there. The second character I want to talk about, I guess we'll go down the friend list, Michael. Michael's not in the episode, so he goes to default to the book. Michael is the I think he is the overweight kid in the friend group, he and Bird, the athletic baseball player kid, get in a lot of stuff, arguments and tussles and stuff like that. He's kind of just, a superfluous Clay in terms of the overall story, because him and Bird up and disappear from the story before the final act in the book. So he's not really missed by me. If I had a real preference, I'd give it to the episode, because him and Bird fighting in the book was really annoying. But it is what it is. I'll give it to Michael to the episode. And since I've already brought up Bird, I will talk about Bird. Bird in the episode kind of replaces Michael, and he's not given his own identity with like the baseball game and stuff. And seeing that character get kind of punished was really worth it in the book in some ways. But he was less annoying because there's no Michael in the episode. As in the book, like I said, Stein spent a lot of focus in the third person, not in first person from Greg's point of view, but in the third person, setting up these scenes and just endless banter with Bird going on sometimes. And it got really old. So if I had a preference, I'm less annoyed with the episode, but I do think there are some scarier scenes with Bird in the book. So I have to kind of weigh which one I prefer. I'll give it to the episode, just for like a casual experience. Now, if I wanted to be frightened, I'll go with the book. So, but I guess 9 times out of 10, I'm going to lean to the episode, okay? So when it comes to Sherry, this is an interesting one, because I think Sherry had a lot more involvement in the book than she does the episode. In the episode, she's more of like an afterthought of the story, and how she's kind of handled in the plot is really ridiculous. And even more random than the book was. She was fine, but I feel like in the book, her character played a lot more of a role in the overall story, especially with Greg, and I feel like she has more of a presence. So for Sherry, I'm going to give it to the book. We can go over Terry, who is Greg's older brother. In the book, you go more into about, Terry's job and all of that, and pretty much more so the same scenes we get in the episode. So like I said, because there's more there with Terry, I'm going to give it to the book. Greg's parents, his mom and dad, pretty much the same here, except I think in the book, that emotional weight does play more on Greg. So like what happens to them comes off more believable, but the same stuff is still in the episode. So I guess I'll tie them here, because the episode is under a time crunch, not a page constraint like the book. So, they did the parents pretty good in both versions, I would say. Let's see what other characters we could talk about. Oh yeah, we could talk about Spidey. Spidey, the main villain of the story, I should say. In the episode, he's played by, I already forgot his name. Richard something. He did a fantastic job in the episode. I mean, fantastic job. So much so that every time I see an image of him, he still sends shivers down my spine. Spidey in the book, he has more of an origin story near the back end of the story. He, I guess, has more character on display there, but you do kind of still feel that in the episode. And I think the ending change with Spidey makes him more of a reoccurring threat. So for that, I guess what happens to him in the book is petrifying, but I low-key like Spidey more in the episode, so I'm going to give Spidey the edge here. I think he's just more entertaining, even though in the book you do kind of feel his presence in like a Michael Myers type of way, but he's really only in the beginning and the very end of both versions of the tale. So I'm fine with putting Spidey the edge over to the episode here. So that's basically it with the characters, I would think. So let's move on to the atmosphere. Now, this might be kind of controversial to say, but I think the book has no atmosphere. There's really none. It's just a generic neighborhood pretty much the entire time. As in the episode, there's that weird warehouse that Spidey lives in. Spidey's dwelling is described way creepier than the book was, and the look of it looks amazing. And the neighborhood is kind of generic, but at least there's more there in terms of the atmosphere. So with that, I'm going to give the edge to the episode all day for atmosphere. Clearly. No contest, really. Now, getting down to the aesthetics. The aesthetics, I've already kind of touched on what they're going to be. We're going to be talking about the camera. In the book, the camera is described like a traditional camera that we got to see in the new Goosebumps TV show from 2023. In the first episode, Say Cheese and Die, that camera looks more closer to how the book described it. But in the episode, we get like this toy futuristic camera in the look department. And honestly, I think I might give it to the episode for the look of the camera, if only because it looks indestructible. There's something about it that looks super warped and creative. And honestly, I think it has more character than just a generic camera. Given that this camera's indestructible and all that, I don't really buy that a normal looking camera can't be destroyed. So I do buy the episode more in terms of the look. So I'll give it there. And in terms of the camera's abilities, it more so has similar things going on. The camera in the book more so predicts the future, but it's more vague. The episode kind of lays that out, but for the most part, the general gist is that it takes a picture of something and something happens after the picture is taken, right? Almost immediately, or sometimes, not too far into the future. And the camera supposedly has a power to make people disappear. In both versions, Sherry disappears because of the camera, goes missing. And then you have the ability to rip up the photos and bring them back, which is in both versions. But the main difference is the ending. The episode, it kind of adds another power to it. It can absorb people inside of the camera. But, with that being said, when we're talking about like the origins and the functions of the camera in both versions here, the book is so vague. Even when Spidey tries to sit down with Greg and Sherry and tell them about really what's going on, you still don't really get a feel that that's the case. In the episode, Spidey comes out and says, hey, it takes pictures of the future, which kind of exposes the sins of both versions of the story here, because if it just is a camera that predicts the future, then how can it have all these extra abilities? And it, like I said, it gets worse. And I think in the sequel book, it just loses me even more. But if I had a preference, if we're just going to be lazy and ignore that this camera is just predicting the future, I think that I prefer the episode over than the aesthetic of the abilities, because at least it has more. And at least there was an attempt to say what it's actually doing. So there's that for aesthetics. Goes to the episode. Now let's get into the overall plot. Now I'm going to keep this one short and brief. They're pretty much the same story. Greg and his group of friends, give or take Michael, stumble across Spidey's dwelling, whether it be inside of a house like the book or, a warehouse in the episode. They go into the lair. Greg finds the camera. They get into some altercation with Spidey. They learn that the camera might have these abilities. Greg then goes on an experience with the camera, dealing with seeing his family car being crashed, coming close into an accident shortly thereafter. There are some scenes in the book that are trimmed out here in the episode because, you cut out Michael, you replace Bird with Michael. You don't need to go into Bird's side plot of the baseball game. Sherry's birthday party's cut out, and it's just made into a fate encounter. They kind of splice together the bullies near the back half of the story when Greg tries to recruit Bird and Michael to help him. That's when they uncover the bullies in the book. However, in the episode, it happens way earlier on. So there are some mild changes here and there, but it's mostly the same story where Greg and Sherry going through all these experiences. Sherry ends up disappearing. She comes back, helps Greg in the final act. They meet with Spidey, learn Spidey's motives, and have to deal with them with a mildly different ending. Now, I will say the episode is definitely the more streamlined version of the plot, but I do feel like all the best parts of the book that were dark came from those extra things that the book provided, like the whole scene with Bird's baseball game. Sherry's birthday party was kind of eerie in some way, and all of that added more emotional weight to Greg's experience, I feel, in the book. The episode is not that believable, but there are some trade-offs, right? The pace does improve on the dumb decisions Greg has to make. And like I said, it's not an easy choice here because they both have their own strengths and weaknesses. But if I had a slight preference to plot, I'm going to give it to the book. I think there's just more to it, and there's more believability with Greg there. So that's where I'm at. But I can definitely see myself maybe down the line, giving this more of a tie and appreciating them both more equally. But like I said, when it comes to plot, I'll give it to the book. All right. Now, when it comes to the climax, it's mostly the same thing, except the build up to the climax is a bit different. In the episode, Sherry just randomly appears, and you cut all the exposition stuff that the book laid out with how Greg finds Sherry and all that. But it's more so the same thing. You know, they interact with Spidey. Spidey gives his origin backstory, you know, what he's been doing with the camera, his intentions with the kids, and all that. And how the resolution is obviously what do the characters do with the camera to handle Spidey. Both are different. Both are different. I will say that the book has way darker implications because somebody potentially bites the dust. In the episode, it's a bit different because it involves a new ability with the camera. It's honestly a give and take. They're both, I think, on par with each other, and I like them both for different ways. But because I like the ending in one more, I'm kind of giving this away by giving it here. I do think that the climax is a bit tenser in the episode, for the most part, minus the resolution, which I think I'd give to the book. The resolutions easily goes to the book, but everything else about it goes to the episode, so I'm going to give the edge here to the episode, which leads me to the ending. The new power of the camera involves the ending and the twist. In the book, the two bullies from the story play a role in either version. The ones that, you know, try to torment Greg and Bird and Michael in the book version, and then just Greg and Bird in the episode, end up coming across Spidey's dwelling and find the camera, but you don't know what's going to happen, right? The book kind of ends on a cliffhanger, or I guess before another experience with the camera can start. Mild spoiler there, but that's basically what it is. And the episode involves a character that we thought was handled, but hasn't been. And I think there's better sequel bait in the episode involving the power, and I do think that it's kind of intriguing to see what this character can do next in terms of endings. I'm going to give it to the episode. So with that being said, which one do I think is superior? Now this one was kind of a runaway. You know, when I look at the book, right? The book has some things I like better, but often than not, the episode kind of edges it out just for execution, right? I do think that Sherry's better in the book. I do think that the climax resolution is better in the book. I do think the overall plot is a little more richer and more full in the book as well. But everything else, I think I mildly prefer in the episode. Yeah, the book is darker. It's a little scarier. If we're going with tone, I guess one last thing I can bring up, tone, I think I'll give it to the book. It is more darker and scarier, in my opinion. So, yeah, better tone. A little more cheesy in the episode. But I think the episode just wins out for me. And if I had to say which one's superior, I'm going to give it to the episode. And it's by about a hair and a half, in my opinion. I think the aesthetics of the camera make it look cooler. The acting really sells me on these characters. The streamlining of the story kind of helps Greg's decisions, and at the cost of his emotions and some of the scares we get from the book. But I do think the idea here still works and is still creepy enough, especially in the first 5 minutes and in the final 5 minutes. There's some legit tension here. Some all-time great TV show moments came from this episode. And I don't really feel the same about the book. I don't really feel like there's all-time great book moments in here, you know, from the book series. So, you know, this one just seems like a more memorable version of the story, in my opinion. And that might be controversial, but that's just how I feel. I do quite love this episode. I do have a soft spot for it. And I will always love this book for being one of my first Goosebumps books and the nostalgia behind it. But I don't quite love this. So that's just where I'm at, right? So, yeah, kind of close. You know, in some ways, maybe down the line, I might be able to give the book more edges if I were to do this again at some point. But for now, the episode wins out. So, you know, I want you all to go experience both of these versions. Goosebumps is a book franchise. Go read Say Cheese and Die and then go watch the episode. I think for a good amount of you, there might be people out there that say that me saying that the episode is better is blasphemous. The book is easily better. I can kind of understand that. It depends on what you're looking for. The book is written in third person. It's a bit of a different Goosebumps book. It's kind of refreshing, even though it's one of the first ones. But the more you read in the series, I can totally understand why you would be more open to something like this over the episode. The episode definitely has some things about it that reflect its time it was made. But I still think that, all said and done, you're going to like them both. Maybe one more than the other. I can definitely see a lot of people still liking the episode more for some changes if they don't like Greg's as the main character or something like that. I can definitely see why the appeal of the episode would be there for you. But that's just where I'm at. I think there's a lot more strengths that the book has than people like to give it credit for these days. But that's just where I'm at. So that's my thoughts on the Say Cheese and Die book versus episode discussion. Let me know down in the comment section. Which one do you think is superior? Do you think that the book or the episode is better for Say Cheese and Die? Which one's your favorite? What do you like more? I'm dying to know these things, and I'll see you next time.